with all the technology and all the sensors and the wall and the barrier and all the money that went into that, in the end, it all comes down to 19 and 20-year-old young women who are the human factor that really keeps us safe, preventing the next malicious attack on Israeli innocent citizens. That's pretty incredible. Ever since the Jewish people returned to these streets more than 100 years ago, the threat of terrorism has been part of everyday life. So much so that as terrorism evolved and the methodology of it changed, so did the response and the knowledge, the know-how of counterterrorism on the Israeli side. Today, Israel is a superpower in the science of counterterrorism. And that's important because terrorism isn't anymore restricted to Israel, the Middle East, or one or two countries. It's a global issue, and a global issue that requires a global response. So today, we're going deep into the knowledge and the experience of how to counter terrorism from Israel to the rest of the world.
When you watch TV and you sit in your living room and you see the airplanes in 9/11 crashing into the World Trade Center, you are part of it.
Today, with the umbrella of the Iranian, all the threats are coming from terror of extremist radical movements.
There will be always threat. I mean, until we found the solution, there will always threat.
And you have to help this community live with that threat and try to live a normal life.
I can tell you that it's becoming harder and harder every escalation.
We need to unite, not just as Israel, we as the Western countries. Without the joint efforts, we're not going to win the war.
If you want to uproot terrorism, you really need to understand the mindset, the psyche, the philosophy behind it. We're on our way to the Reichman University in Herzliya to meet with Professor Boaz Ganor. Now, Professor Ganor does something super interesting. He leads one of the first counter-terrorism institutes worldwide, and what they do is go deep in thought about how to uproot, how to combat terrorism.
Hi, Mati.
Boaz.
Welcome to the ICT.
Thank you, good to see you.
Please. Let's start by saying that when we are talking about the definition of terrorism, there is no one acceptable definition which is acknowledged internationally, because one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. And that's why I put a lot of importance on the definition of terrorism, because this is the first pillar from which you can build understanding, better practices and policies, global policies, and cooperation in contending with terrorism.
What would your definition be?
Terrorism is the deliberate use of violence aimed against civilian targets by non-state actors in order to achieve political ends. If you adopt the definition that I suggest to you, actually you can find the act of terrorism in biblical time. But what is a new phenomenon is what we call modern terrorism.
Okay.
Modern terrorism is a psychological warfare. The killing is a tool to achieve something which is much bigger than that, fear and anxiety. Terrorists can win the war without shooting one bullet. They disrupt the economy, they disrupt the day-to-day life activity, and so on and so forth. This phenomenon erupted in the midst of the 20th century. The immediate era after the Second World War. More and more states got independence and became democracies. And I would argue that the democracy is heaven for terrorists. Don't get me wrong, it's not that I'm against democracy. I don't know any better regime to live in. But still, a democracy has embedded values, liberal democratic values, which exactly give the backwind which is needed for the terrorists to act.
But we've seen a different thing, which is the big-scale wars, country against country, multiple countries against country, they don't exist anymore. I mean, are the two things connected?
They are tightly connected because the world has learned something from the First and the Second World War, which is that wars deteriorate rapidly. It can start with a local conflict and become a global war at the end of the day. And second, maybe most important, is the price of the war. How many people died in the Second World War? Millions and millions and millions of people. And suddenly, states...
So what, terrorism is the solution for that?
Exactly. How? By proxies. Few states that founded terrorist organizations, sponsored them, gave them orders to conduct activities that will promote the interest of the state. To name a few, USSR, Syria, Libya, and nowadays we see Iran as a spearhead of state sponsorship for terrorism, and so on and so forth.
The changing modern world not only created the fertile soil for terrorism to grow, it also provided new tools for terrorists to use.
TV actually had a very important role because people could have known about terrorist attacks by reading the newspaper, but when you sit in your living room and you watch TV, the impact of anxiety is much, much bigger than any other attack. If I need to pinpoint a date, I think it's the Olympic Games in Munich. Why? Because in the Olympic Games, we had an unprecedented concentration of media in one place, in a certain time, where the attention of all the world was aimed to that. And that was the reason why the Palestinians chose to attack exactly there.
At the 1972 Summer Olympics in Munich, the Palestinian terrorist group, Black September, killed 2 members of the Israeli Olympic team and took 9 more hostage. After a failed rescue attempt by the German authorities, all 9 of the hostages were killed. This attack, known as the Munich Massacre, went down in history as the first of its kind to attract such a widespread media attention.
George Habash, he was part of the planners of the attack in Munich. He wrote that they chose that specific target because it's as if they wrote the word Palestine on the Everest mountain. Everybody can see, everybody's watching that. Afterwards, the whole phenomenon has changed. You have this concept of copycat. Whatever is being regarded as a successful measure is being then copycat by other terrorists altogether. Unfortunately, Israel has found itself as a laboratory, not just for counter-terrorism, but also for the terrorists themselves.
Welcome back to the studio. It's amazing to see. Mati, we're surrounded with challenges and threats all around, but God is still in control.
100%.
God is still looking over Israel.
Yeah, and I mean, we've looked at the facts. We've talked to the experts. And this idea that, that terrorism is a one-time thing, that's not the case. Terrorism keeps evolving and moving. And from the early days, we've really had to come up with creative and unique ways to deal with it. So when we spoke to Boaz Ganor, you really see that on his wall, where all these international organizations are saying, hold on, we're dealing with a problem we've never dealt with before, but who has? Israel. So let's go ask them what they've been doing to solve that problem.
So even in that issue, Israel becomes sad to say, but becomes a lie to the nation.
Yeah, even in the problematic aspects, we've learned first.
So Mati, let's continue watching.
We're on our way to meet Major General Eitan Dangot. Eitan was the coordinator of Israel's activity in Judea and Samaria, but also the military secretary to 3 different ministers of defense. And those roles give him this really deep understanding of Israel's challenges in this region, and more so how we've evolved to deal with them. Technology, methodology, all of that. He's really the expert on this topic. General.
Hi.
Hey, good to
How
see
are
you.
We are in a process around us and also inside Israel that the terror is in a process of changement. What does it mean? We are losing around us the meaning of states. Lebanon, it's a state that's controlled by the main terror organization in the world, I mean the Hezbollah. Secondly, Syria. Syria today is a way of joining between few militias of terrorism and coming to Gaza. It's a place that's controlled by radical Sunni terrorism. It means that today the terrorism really changed the rules of the game. With all the strongness of Israel, you have to choose. You can make a great damage, for example, to Lebanon, but what will be the value in the fact that millions of people will be suffered, while the main operator in Lebanon, it's a kind of terror organization that is leading by Iran. You have to be more direct towards the terror organization to destroy its financial sources or main people. The Middle East today is unstabilized. The terrorism are climbing more and more high to the top. So the decision in Israel was that we had to make a change.
Hi,
Hey, Ziv.
how are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Welcome
So
to
this
our
is home for you, huh?
Yeah,
Netiv Haasara.
this is Netiv Haasara.
And you've got quite the view to go with it.
right in front of us.
Right over there, that's Gaza, like just
That's
over that
Gaza.
hill.
Yeah, that's Gaza over here, and you can see over there,
Yeah.
there's one of the Hamas spots, just in front of us.
So we're really on the
They are
fence.
watching us right now.
I met with the head of security for Netiv Haasara, a small town that sits just 300 feet from the Gaza border and is one of the first lines of defense against Hamas terror attacks.
What is interesting here, you can see that all these houses are actually exposed to the other side.
So we're looking just a couple hundred meters away.
Right, and you can
That's
see
the Gaza Strip.
That's the Gaza Strip.
You don't see many soldiers all around us.
We have a lot of technology. If somebody is getting close to the fence,
You already know.
right.
So this is my first time at this fence, and it is a lot more impressive and imposing up close than it was in my head.
Right.
And then this is just above the surface.
Right, and also under the surface, there's a great cement wall that's going 80 meters deep to the ground.
What is that, 250 feet of reinforced, electronically supervised wall into the ground. Not only is there concrete over there, cameras, machine guns, and then a fence and a no man's land and electronics. Even if you tried to go under the ground, you'd be detected.
That's the whole idea.
Yeah.
Hamas has been digging underground tunnels for the past 20 years to smuggle weapons and infiltrate Israel. The new fence has been incredibly successful in eliminating this threat. But as advanced as this fence may be, when you live this close to the border, some attacks are simply unavoidable. I met with 2 IDF observers. They gave me some insight into what it's like to know that sometimes the only thing standing between Israel and a terrorist is soldiers like them.
So we're sitting here in this base. We're in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, loaded with technology, all this clandestine and secret equipment we can't talk about. But we're here to talk about what you do in the Army. You're observers in the IDF.
So we sit in a situation room in front of screens and look through cameras that watch over the Gaza Strip. We're protecting the border. We have to recognize if something is innocent and is part of the normal routine or if something is suspicious.
And we know the territory very well. We know like every rock, every bush in the area.
Our intention isn't to attack, it's to prevent an attack from happening and just to protect all the villages around and all the citizens.
We make sure they're safe, no one crosses, no one hurts them.
That's a huge responsibility.
You know, it's very scary. A lot of responsibility is scary.
You know, with all the technology and all the sensors and the wall and the barrier and all the money that went into that, in the end, it all comes down to 19 and 20-year-old young women who are the human factor that really keeps us safe, preventing the next malicious attack on Israeli innocent citizens. That's pretty incredible.
So for now, Israel has found a way to deal with the terror on its borders. But what does the future hold for Israel and the democratic world?
We saw it time and again in history when states, including our best friend, United States, that has a tendency to be isolationist, and I can understand why. Huge superpower, far away from other states. Why should we bother with problems that happens in different parts of the world? You should bother because if you won't bother, it will come to your territory. We saw it in 9/11. Unfortunately, I predicted we will see this again. 2000, the second Intifada, I was in the United States. I was sent by the Israeli Foreign Ministry. One of the lectures was planned to be on the 11th of September 2001. The title of the invitation to my lecture was Countering Suicide Terrorism, the Israeli Challenge. On that day, the title was irrelevant anymore.
It became an international challenge.
It became an international challenge. As an outcome of the fact that Israel faced the biggest number of types of terrorist attacks, hostage-breaking situation, kidnapping, shooting at, lone wolves attacks, stabbing, running down, everything you have in mind. And balancing our liberal democratic values together with one important value, which is protecting the right of the people to live, the balance is the art.
Hey, I'm Mati Shoshani, and thank you for watching the TBN Israel YouTube channel. We hope this video gave you greater understanding of Israel and her people. If you haven't already, subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. We'd love to hear from you, so be sure to share what you've learned and ask your questions in comments below. And invite your friends to join the conversation.